Let's get some analysis now. Mark Watson is National Security Advisor at Bondi Partners, former Security Advisor at the Australian Embassy in Washington. Thanks, Mark. Great to see you as always. What do you make of these numbers? Not great for Joe Biden.
Not great. I think the US electorate is giving Joe Biden at best a C+, must do better mark for his first year in office. I don't think it's anywhere near where the Democrats thought they would be at this stage in the presidential electoral cycle. And of course, it reflects a general sense in America that is reflected in the polls that America is going in the wrong direction. Something like 70% of Americans, including 70% of independent voters and nearly half of the Democrats, registered Democrats, say that America is going in the wrong direction, whatever that means to individuals. That's reflected in President Biden's polls, and I think it's reflected in the polls in New Jersey and Virginia as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, we don't just need the published opinion polls, we've got the real polls of last week, those gubernatorial elections, particularly in Virginia, as you say.
That's right. It was a very interesting result. New Jersey, which should be absolute blue ribbon Democrat state, last year, 12 months ago, Joe Biden thumped President Trump in New Jersey, and this year, 12 months later, they squeaked home for the governor's race. In Virginia, of course, they lost. The Republicans won the race to be governor in Virginia. They've only won once in the last 20 years in that election, so that tells you what's happened. Virginia, again, voted very solidly for Joe Biden 1 year ago. I think it was 55-45. And this year, 12 months later, they lose the race for the governor's mansion. And that reflects a couple of things. One is that general vibe, if you like, across the US, that things aren't going well. There's some local elections around education, school boards. The teaching of critical race theory, for example, in schools, was a bit of a flashpoint. But that really reflects the problems that Democrats have reconciling the left wing of the party, the green wing, the progressive wing, with the centrist, centre-left, traditional Democrat voters and the independents. And so the Democrats really going to have to have a good, long, hard look at what happened there in Virginia. For the Republicans, it's great news. What it showed was there is a path through the President Trump landscape to victory, electoral victory. And so the governor-elect, Glenn Youngkin, was able to steer a path where he paid due homage to the former president. He acknowledged the concerns of the Trump supporters and was able to gel that vote, but he didn't go to the extreme and alienate the centrist or the independent voters. So the Republican Party would be delighted with that result.
Yeah, let's start with the Republican side, because he accepted the endorsement from former President Trump, didn't campaign heavily with him, and certainly if you looked at the signs at the Youngkin rallies, there's no Trump 2024 references, it's just all about Glenn Youngkin, and he was successful with that middle path.
Absolutely. He's a political clean skin. He came to this from business, I believe. And as you say, he was able to do enough to satisfy that Trump voting bloc in the electorate, but also to pull in independents. And that, as I say, reflects that 70% of independents who think the country, for a whole bunch of reasons, whether it's the southern border, whether it's the chaotic and ultimately quite tragic botched withdrawal from Afghanistan, these things all just contribute to a sense we're not going in the right direction. I think that coalesced in this vote. It's going to be very interesting in next year's congressional elections, and the Republicans would take great heart from this, I think.
We saw that challenge for the Democrats, didn't we, in terms of not just the Virginia result, but also in Congress, the challenge of getting that big ticket infrastructure bill through. I mean, it barely got through. It was smaller and delayed.
That's correct. And it's a win for Joe Biden, no question. If he'd failed in that effort, that would have been catastrophic, because one of the things he campaigned on is, I'm a bridge builder. I can bring together votes across the aisle to deliver on key policies. Well, he did deliver on this. It's a huge $1.2 trillion US dollars package of measures to rebuild infrastructure. But 6 of his own party voted against it, crossed the floor, if you like. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Representative Ocasio-Cortez, voted against it with 5 of her colleagues, but sufficient Republicans went the other way to support it, to get it over the line. There's another big challenge coming up, which is a second package, which is worth $1.6 trillion US dollars, which is built around green policies and social policies, and that really is to throw a bone to the left of the Democratic Party. But even that's got some opposition from key Democrats in the Senate. So it's not going to be an easy path for the president to navigate.
So both sides have their broad church to manage. What about, just finally, Alexander Downer said to me on the Sunday Agenda program, raised some concerns around the French handling of this spat. Paul Kelly saying that AUKUS needs to have a process around it to build confidence in it in terms of the US and Australian prism. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, it does. I don't think that there's been any significant damage done to either AUKUS or the Australian-US relationship by what's happened around the submarines. Even though President Biden made his statement, which made things very difficult for the Prime Minister, obviously, politically. But nonetheless, I think it's a ripple on the pond. And what's happened is AUKUS has laid the table for a whole range of measures and technology transfers, joint activity with the United States, but it's not going to serve the food. And that means that the government here and the government there have to work very quickly to start putting some meat on those bones of AUKUS to really get some programs up and running as quickly as possible to say, look, AUKUS is working.
And once you get to that point, it adds another layer to the texture, I guess, of the alliance, which we saw during the Trump period, despite turbulence maybe on the surface, those relations continue.
Absolutely they do. And it's because it's built on a very solid foundation of shared ideals, a commitment to certain key principles and understandings around liberal democracy, free trade, freedom of navigation, etc. And these temporary tribulations will pass.
Mark Watson from Bondi Partners, great to see you.
Good to see you, Karen.
As always, talk to you soon.